Cartel kidnapped a 17-year-old boy. They thought his dad was just a quiet farmer. He wasn't. He was a retired Delta Force commander. What happened next? Before watching, please subscribe. The wind rolled over the fields like a slow wave, kicking dust into the golden evening light. Crickets chirped lazily from the tall grass, and somewhere beyond the cotton rows, a lone coyote called out across the ridge. James Cole, 51 years old, leaned against the fence post with a steaming mug of black coffee in one hand and a shotgun resting upright in the crook of his elbow. Not because he expected trouble, just habit. The kind of muscle memory a man didn't lose, no matter how many years passed. His farm sat on the dry edge of Val Verde County, just a couple miles north of the Texas-Mexico border. 40 acres of old land, passed down through a family that didn't have many stories left. James didn't farm for money. Not anymore. He did it because the routine kept the ghosts quiet. Behind him, the lights of the farmhouse flicked on. Eli, 17, was setting the table. The boy was tall, quiet, kind, more like his late mother than like James, which was probably for the best. James had raised him alone since his wife's cancer took her 6 years earlier. Eli waved from the porch. "Dinner's on," he called. James took one last look at the sunset. It bled orange across the hills, painting the shadows long. He nodded to the empty field. "Keep watch." The shotgun didn't answer, but he brought it in anyway. Inside, the kitchen smelled like garlic and beef. Chili on the stove. Cornbread in the oven. Simple, sturdy food. Eli handed him a plate. "You hear from Sanchez today?" James grunted. "Yeah, auction's still on for Saturday. You ready to drive down?" Eli nodded, chewing. "If I leave early, I'll be back by sundown, taking the South Trail past Blanco's ranch. Should shave half an hour." "South Trail's rough. You sure?" "I patched the truck's suspension yesterday. She'll hold." James studied his son a moment. Same eyes as his mother. Soft but steady. "All right. Keep your phone on you, and don't stop for anyone." "I'm not a kid, Dad." James didn't respond. Didn't have to. Eli knew the rules weren't just for safety. They were for survival. Later that night, James sat on the porch, a whiskey glass sweating in his hand. The stars overhead were sharp and close, like you could reach out and grab one if your hands were steady enough. He listened to the night. Every creak of wood, every shift of wind, every memory trying to slip out from under the floorboards. Helmand Province, Mosul, Kandahar. Too many towns that didn't exist anymore. Too many names that only lived in his head. James had done 12 years in Army Special Forces, most of them with a long-range reconnaissance unit. He'd hunted bomb makers in the desert, rescued hostages from cellars that smelled of rot and diesel, and buried friends in sand that couldn't hold a cross. When his wife died, he put it all down, buried the uniform, moved home, started planting things instead of breaking them. But some things don't stay buried. They wait. Saturday morning came hot and fast. Eli left before sunrise with a thermos of coffee and a trailer full of yearling goats for auction. James stood on the porch, watched the taillights disappear down the trail. He'd said it a dozen times. "Don't stop. Don't talk to anyone. Trust your gut." The boy listened. But James couldn't shake the feeling. Something in the air felt wrong. He chalked it up to nerves, went back inside, fed the chickens, sharpened a few fence tools, checked the well pump. Routine. It wasn't until 2:14 p.m. that the first call came. Unknown number. Valley area code. He let it go to voicemail. Then the second came, and the third. On the fourth, he answered. Static. Then a voice, thick with accent. "You are the father?" James stiffened. "Who is this?" "Your boy is fine, for now. But you will listen." James stepped inside, shut the door with one hand, reaching under the counter with the other. The SIG P226. He hadn't touched in years slid into his palm like an old friend. "I'm listening," he said. The voice explained that Eli had been picked up just across the border near La Puerta. They thought he was the son of a prominent rancher who had crossed them. Wanted a ransom. $50,000, U.S. cash, no cops. They'd even sent a photo, grainy, from a burner phone. Eli was tied to a chair in a cinder-block room, blood on his lip. Still alive. James said nothing. Didn't curse, didn't plead. Just asked, "Where?" The line went dead. He didn't call the sheriff. He didn't file a report. Instead, he went to the shed behind the barn. Unlocked a trunk he hadn't opened since his wife's funeral. Inside, a suppressed rifle wrapped in oilcloth. 3 full mags. His old radio headset, a map with red X's still marked in faded Sharpie, and his dog tags, he clipped them on. Then he sat down at the workbench, opened a dusty notebook, and flipped to the last page. A name, a number, one he'd sworn never to call again. He dialed. "Yeah," the voice on the other end said. James spoke quietly, firmly. "They took my son." A pause. Then, "Send me the location. I'll get you in." By sundown, James Cole was no longer a farmer. He was a father going to war, again. The crossing at Del Rio was quiet that morning. A few tourists, a handful of long haulers. Border Patrol sat in the shade of their truck, sipping coffee and barely glancing at the cars trickling through. James Cole wasn't in a car. He came on foot. A plain pack on his back, worn boots, and the same face he wore in every passport photo. Expressionless, faded, forgettable. The beard helped. So did the posture, relaxed but ready. He didn't bring much, just enough. In the lining of his pack, a takedown rifle, disassembled a silencer. 2 burner phones, $8,000 in cash, banded in hundreds, and a photo of Eli, printed the night before. He crossed without raising an eyebrow. A friendly nod, a quick step, and then he was in Coahuila. The first hour on the Mexican side was about movement. No questions, no hesitation, just forward motion. He headed east through Acuña, blending with foot traffic and vendors. His Spanish was quiet and clean. Years of field time had polished it until it passed as native. He ducked into a cafe where the lights didn't quite work, sat at the back, ordered a coffee, black. Then he waited. The man who arrived wore a cowboy hat and a pressed shirt, sleeves rolled. His name was Salvador Rivas, a former federale who now worked off the books, mostly for cash, sometimes for revenge. "James Cole," he said with a thin smile. "Haven't heard that name in a while." "Didn't need to hear it," James replied. Rivas sat, sipped his own drink. "You know who took the boy? Cartel's got him, group in La Puerta." "You think it's Montalvo?" James nodded once. Rivas exhaled through his teeth. "You sure know how to piss off the worst people." Diego Montalvo ran a mid-tier cell under the Sierra Blanca cartel. His domain included back-road trafficking, high-risk ransom, and low-profile abductions. He preferred victims who wouldn't be reported, migrants, runaways, or people like Eli who slipped across the line in quiet towns no one monitored. If they found out they took the wrong kid, Eli would vanish. No ransom, no witness, no body. Rivas handed over a printed sat map. "Safe house here, about 6 clicks south of La Puerta. Intel says Montalvo rotates his stash spots, but if they moved your kid fast, odds are he's still there." James folded the map. "What's the approach?" 3 guards on rotation, 1 driver, generator out back, wired to a motion alarm. They got dogs. "Any civilians?" "None you'd call innocent." James stood, tucked the map into his pack. Rivas narrowed his eyes. "You planning to go loud or quiet?" James looked down at his coffee. "Depends what I find inside." The dirt roads south of La Puerta were hot, dry, and patrolled by no one official. Just burnt-out SUVs and watchful eyes behind cracked windows. James moved at dusk. Less visibility, more shadow. He crept through mesquite scrub, using what cover the landscape gave him. Step by step, breath by breath. When he reached the ridge above the safe house, the sun was gone. The sky was pink-gray. A coyote howled in the distance. James dropped to prone, unpacked the rifle piece by piece. The scope clicked into place. The silencer spun tight. He watched the building for nearly an hour. Movement. 2 guards. 1 smoker. 1 pacing the south wall. No dogs tonight. A gift. At 2200, he moved. Fast, low, silent. He breached through the side entrance. A rusted tin door behind the generator shack. 1 guard rounded the corner just as James entered the courtyard. The man opened his mouth. Too late. The stock cracked into his jaw. He dropped. James dragged the body into the shadows and slipped inside. The hallway smelled of ammonia and cigarettes. The light flickered overhead. He passed 2 empty rooms, a stack of folded tarps, and a cooler. Then he found the chair. Ropes. Blood on the concrete. No Eli. Just a kid's hoodie tossed on the floor. Eli's hoodie. James picked it up, felt the blood was still damp. Not much. A warning hit, not an execution. A man stepped out from the back hall with a pistol tucked low, eyes half closed. James didn't hesitate. 2 shots. Center mass. The man dropped like meat. In the back room he found a girl, maybe 12, handcuffed to a pipe. Eyes wide, gaunt. She flinched when he entered. James dropped to 1 knee. "I'm not with them." She stared. "Boy, blonde hair, my son, was he here?" She nodded. "They took him, yesterday, north, big man with a black truck." "Where?" "Don't know, said ranch, not here." James unlocked her cuffs with a key from the dead man's belt. "Can you walk?" She nodded again, weak but alive. He handed her a burner phone. "Call this number, Salvador, he'll take care of you." He pointed to the hills. "Run west, don't stop. You'll see headlights in 5 minutes." She didn't say thank you. She just ran. Smart. James exfiltrated through the back field, melted into darkness, and didn't speak again until he reached the ridge and keyed his sat phone. "They moved him," he told Rivas. "North. Some kind of ranch. Big truck. Black. Enforcer type." Rivas cursed. "That's Rancho Viento. Belongs to Montalvo's cousin. It's fortified. You'll need help." "I don't have time for help." There was silence. Then, "You planning to walk into a cartel stronghold alone?" "I walked through worse." "Yeah, but this time it's personal." James didn't argue. He just packed up the rifle, dusted off his knees, and started walking. Toward fire, toward war. Toward his son. The phone rang at 2:03 a.m. Inside a sprawling ranch house in Sabinas, Diego Montalvo lit a cigar and answered without checking the number. He knew the voice on the other end. His cousin. "Got a problem," the voice said. "The kid? He's nobody." Montalvo sat up straighter. "What do you mean nobody?" "Name's Eli Cole. No priors. Not connected to Ortega like we thought. Kid's from some backwoods town in Texas. Dad's a farmer. Nothing on record." Montalvo frowned. "Farmer doesn't explain the American burning my safe house." "What?" "Somebody hit La Puerta tonight. Quiet and clean. 2 guards down. 1 of our girls gone. Shot my lieutenant twice in the chest. Only 1 man made it out to talk." The voice on the phone hesitated. "You think it's the kid's father?" "If it is," Montalvo said, exhaling a cloud of smoke, "he's not a farmer. He's something else." He stood, walked to the window, and stared into the night. "Move the boy. Now take him to the pit near San Lorenzo. Burn everything that touches his name. No body, no trail." "And the American?" Montalvo ground the cigar into an ashtray. "If he comes, bury him with his son." Eli Cole woke in the back of a truck, wrists zip-tied and mouth gagged. His head pounded. His lips were cracked from dehydration. He didn't know where he was, only that the ride had been long, bumpy, and filled with Spanish he couldn't follow. 2 men up front. One in the bed with him, holding a rifle and chewing sunflower seeds. Eli tried to sit up. The man shoved him down with a boot and muttered, "Almost done, Guerrito." Almost done. That didn't sound like ransom. That sounded like finality. 2 ridgelines away, James Cole crouched in the dust beside an abandoned goat shed, watching the same black truck bounce across a dirt path. He raised the binoculars. Eli, tied, face bruised, alive, and moving toward a concrete pit he knew well. San Lorenzo had once been used as a field disposal site during cartel wars. Burn pits, lime, disappearances. He'd seen it in ops briefs. Now it held his son's name. He reached for his radio. "Rivas, they've got him, heading northeast. Confirming black truck, 3 men, 1 rifle, intercepting at Sector 14. Copy, need backup?" No time. James moved like a ghost, down the ridge, across a dry creek bed, and up the rise just west of the convoy's projected route. He unpacked his rifle, set up with a view of the choke point. 2 bends in the road. 1 shot. He waited. Then the truck appeared, headlights off, crawling slow through the wash. James adjusted windage. Inhaled, exhaled, fired. The first round shattered the driver's side glass. The truck swerved. Second shot, passenger throat, blood sprayed. Third shot, the man in the back with the rifle stood, confused. Too late. James was already moving. He sprinted down the slope as the truck rolled to a stop against a tree. Gunfire sprayed wildly from the other side, but poorly aimed. James ducked low, approached from the right, and flanked hard. One of the men stumbled out, coughing, bleeding, pistol raised. James dropped him with a single round to the chest. The last cartel soldier, the one who'd been riding in the bed, grabbed Eli as a shield. James shouted, "Drop him!" The man yelled back in Spanish, "Back off or I'll—" Eli bit the man's wrist. He screamed. James shot him in the face. Silence followed. James ran to the truck, yanked the back open, and cut Eli's ties with a combat knife. Eli looked at him, dazed but conscious. "Dad," James cupped his son's face. "I got you. You're okay." Eli looked around, blood on his shirt, trembling. "They were gonna kill me. Not today." James lifted him from the truck, cradled him like when he was 6 years old, and broke his leg falling out of the hayloft. He walked them both into the trees and called Rivas. "Package secured," he said. There was a pause. "You're not out yet." James looked to the west. Headlights, 2 more vehicles, coming fast. The truck they'd stolen sat half submerged in the creek bed, nose tilted like a wounded animal trying to breathe. James Cole crouched beside it, reloading his pistol with steady hands. His son, Eli, sat on the dry slope above, pale, blood-specked, and shaking with adrenaline. They hadn't spoken in 15 minutes. The firefight had been quick, messy, and loud. 2 cartel SUVs came in hard, one with a mounted gun, the other packed with shooters. James had led them through a draw between 2 ridgelines, where he'd planted a surprise. IEDs weren't just for Afghanistan. Fertilizer, a few blasting caps, and timing. Now those men weren't following anyone. James climbed up the slope, slid next to Eli. "You hit?" he asked. Eli shook his head. I didn't know it could get that loud." James nodded once. "It's always loud the first time." They sat in silence again, the echo of war fading into crickets and wind. Eli looked at his father like he didn't know him. And maybe he didn't. They walked for miles after dark, cutting through arroyos and brush until they reached a stone outcropping near a dried-up well. James had a cache there, years old, buried deep. He cleared the sand, lifted a false rock, and dug until his fingers hit metal. A waterproof container. Inside, 2 suppressed rifles, a satellite phone, a roll of burner Sims, a photo of James and his old team, younger, cleaner, bloodless, and a patch Delta Force. D Squadron. Eli stared at it, You said you were just Army. James paused, then looked him in the eye. I was a lot of things. They made camp under the outcrop. Small fire, just enough for heat. Eli finally asked the question that had been crawling up his throat. Why didn't you tell me? James took a long sip from his canteen before answering. I buried that life when your mother got sick. After she died, it didn't feel like it mattered anymore. I didn't want you growing up looking at me like a weapon. Eli didn't respond right away. Then he asked, So what are you now? James looked into the fire. Right now? A man who's not done bleeding yet. At dawn, they headed north, toward the Rio Grande. James kept low, scanning the terrain with the cold precision of a man who'd counted more exits than sunrises. Rivas met them near a dilapidated gas station on the edge of Piedras Negras. He whistled when he saw Eli. Kid's lucky. Montalvo doesn't usually leave hostages breathing. Eli glanced at his father. He didn't leave me. My dad came. James said nothing, but something in his jaw tightened. Rivas leaned on the truck. Bad news. Montalvo knows who you are now. Doesn't matter. He's fortified the ranch. Drones, more men. Rumor says he's importing ex-military security. Mercs? Ex-Caibiles. Maybe a couple ex-FARC guys. Jungle-trained, brutal. James adjusted the strap on his pack. Then I'll bring a bigger shovel. That night, James made a call. Not to the police, not to the embassy. To an old teammate, Calderon, a sniper, still active in private work. You owe me, James said. I owed you 12 years ago. You want bodies or eyes? Both. When? 2 days. Who are we killing? Anyone between me and Montalvo. Eli slept in a safe house that night, guarded by Rivas and 2 trustworthy men. James, meanwhile, stared out at the desert from the second-floor window, holding his old rifle across his lap. He was older, slower. His bones ached from the past. But there was one thing left in him no one could fake. Purpose. He would burn Montalvo's name off the map if that's what it took. The wind tore across the sand like a razor. It was just past midnight when James Cole and Calderon reached the edge of Rancho Montalvo, crouched behind rusted fencing and mesquite scrub. The ranch wasn't just fortified. It was a war zone dressed up like farmland. Drones circled the perimeter in tight loops. Generator-powered floodlights snapped on and off in motion-detecting sequences. Men in black tactical gear patrolled in 4-man fire teams, armed like paramilitaries. Calderon scanned the layout through thermal optics. They're expecting you, he muttered. This ain't a bluff. These are real shooters. James didn't blink. Then I won't have to explain myself. They watched from a ridgeline for 40 minutes, mapping patterns, weak points, and shadows the lights couldn't reach. Calderon pointed. That's the east fence, electric, but the wires are patchy. We cut at the bottom and roll under fast, then through the irrigation ditch, and we're inside the perimeter. Guard rotations, 4-minute sweeps, staggered, sloppy, but still dangerous. James nodded. We'll go cold until the second patrol clears the grain silo, then move. Calderon grinned. Damn, I forgot what it's like running ops with you. Felt like I aged out of this kind of crazy. James clipped a suppressor onto his rifle. You did, but I didn't. The breach was silent. A quick wire cut, a timed belly crawl under a loose panel. They were inside. They slipped past the stables, hugging the shadows, until they reached the equipment hangar. A truck idled just beyond, engine humming like a sleeping animal. Voices. 2 guards, smoking and joking in Spanish, unaware death had arrived. James signaled. 2 shots, synchronized. Head and throat. Both bodies dropped before the cigarettes hit the dirt. Calderon dragged one behind a haystack. James searched the other. No phone, just a laminated card. Level 2 access. El Diablo. James stared at the name. Montalvo called himself that now. The devil. Cute. They moved deeper into the property, stepping over loose gravel and bloodstains, past cattle pens with no cattle, only crates wrapped in chains. Drug containers, maybe something worse. Calderon tapped James's shoulder. Eyes on the house, top floors lit, movement inside. James raised his scope. Montalvo! Standing in the upper room, speaking on the phone, pacing like a man who knew war was coming and didn't care. James raised the rifle, centered the shot, but hesitated. Not yet. He wanted answers before justice. They reached the servant entrance just as another guard passed the south wall. James waited until the man turned, then struck. Quick chokehold, knee to the spine, and down he went without a sound. Inside, the hallway stank of sweat and chlorine. Fake cleanliness overwrought. James crept toward the center stairwell while Calderon cut right, planting remote charges and clearing side rooms. Then James heard it. A scream. Female. Young. He followed it through a reinforced door, down concrete stairs, into a room where two men stood over a girl. One held a camera. The other had a belt. James didn't stop to warn. He fired twice. Both dropped in wet piles. The girl, no older than 11, curled up, sobbing. Her arms were bruised, her hair shaved unevenly. James knelt, his voice like gravel wrapped in calm. "You're safe now. I'm going to get you out of here." She stared, breathless, like she wasn't sure he was real. "You're American?" she whispered. "Delta," he replied. They hid her in a safe closet, handed her a burner phone, and told her to count to 500 before moving. Then they headed upstairs. At the top of the stairs, they found Montalvo's inner office, filled with high-end liquor, assault rifles, stacks of euros, and half-burned photos of missing people. James stepped into the center. Montalvo wasn't there, but a door opened behind him, and he was, wearing a white button-up and slacks. Calm, holding a cigar like a banker, not a butcher. "Mr. Cole," he said in perfect English, "I was wondering when you'd arrive." James raised the rifle. "Where are the rest of the girls?" Montalvo didn't flinch. "Dead. Sold. Gone. Like your son should have been." James fired. But Montalvo was already ducking, grabbing a pistol from behind a whiskey bottle and flipping the desk for cover. The two men exchanged gunfire across 10 feet of space. Calderon came in from the left, flanking. Montalvo winged him in the shoulder. James advanced, shot Montalvo in the leg. The man screamed, fell, dropped his gun. James stood over him, breathing like a furnace. "You took my son," James growled. "Now I'm taking everything else." Montalvo coughed blood. "This won't stop it. There are others." James chambered around. "But there won't be you." He pulled the trigger. The shot echoed like thunder through the bones of the house. Calderon limped into the room and tossed James a detonator. "Charges are set." James nodded once. "Let's burn this place to the ground." By morning, Rancho Montalvo was smoke and ash. The fire took the main house first, then the crates, then the hidden rooms James hadn't had time to clear. The local police watched from a mile away and did nothing. The cartel had paid for their silence too long, but the fire that they couldn't bribe. Ash fell like snow across the dry land, and among the rumors already leaking across town, one name surfaced again and again. El Gringo Fantasma, the ghost farmer, the one who came back from nowhere and made the devil bleed. James Cole didn't stop. He didn't even go back to the safe house. He left Eli in trusted hands with Rivas and Calderon and headed deeper into Coahuila's back channels, where the cartel operated like a government and the roads had no patrols unless you paid for them. His goal wasn't just rescue anymore. It was eradication. Montalvo had been a middleman, a powerful one, but not the head. Now that James had cracked the shell, he wanted the yoke. He wanted the man at the top. He started with the stash house in El Palmar. 3 guards, 1 lookout, and a tunnel hidden under a chicken coop. James waited until 2 a.m., disabled the generator, and smoked the guards one by one. He left the tunnel open and called Rivas. "Send your guys. There's 20 kilos under there, and 5 girls, still alive." "Jesus," Rivas said. "You're building a war file. I'm building a case." 2 nights later, James hit a weapons convoy. Not directly, just enough to slow them. He planted spikes on the highway. When the lead truck crashed, he walked up wearing a raincoat, shot the driver, and vanished before backup arrived. Every time they got close, he was already gone. He hit a money drop next, burned the pesos, left the euros in a trash bag on a church doorstep. By the end of the week, Cartel radio chatter had changed tone. He's ex-military. He's not alone. He doesn't want money. He wants blood. Rivas picked him up in a beat-up SUV 4 days later. "You know they put a price on your head." James didn't look up. "How much?" "500,000 pesos. "That's it?" "You're a farmer to them." "A dead one." James finally smirked. "Then let's raise the price." He used burner phones to call ex-teammates, not to fight, just for names. One sent him a file on Luis Santiago, Montalvo's immediate superior. Santiago ran logistics, trafficking, cleanup. He also ran a private compound outside Monclova, guarded by 6 men and 2 Rottweilers. That night, James took out the power, dropped smoke grenades over the fence, and raided it like it was Baghdad all over again. Santiago tried to flee through the back door. James caught him by the collar and threw him into a wall. "Please," Santiago screamed. "I don't know anything." "Wrong answer." James shot him in the foot. Santiago screamed louder. Then James asked again, slower. "Where do the girls go?" Santiago told him. Everything. Names, routes, accounts. Even the safe house where Montalvo's wife had once been kept. A woman who had gone missing 20 years earlier. James froze at that. 20 years. A woman disappeared. He called Rivas. "Send the file on missing U.S. nationals. Filter by female, early 30s abducted as minors." Rivas replied 10 minutes later. "One match, Emily Grace Whitmore, disappeared in 1986. Illinois. Parents never stopped looking." James stared at the photo. Green eyes, auburn hair. "I'm sending coordinates," he said. "Get the federales. Quietly." The next night, the house was raided. Emily was there, alive, and the entire child trafficking network James had stumbled into began to unravel, not just because of what he'd done, but because of who he'd become. The cartel still whispered his name. El Gringo Fantasma, the one who didn't come for money. He came for blood, and for his son. The cartel didn't wait long. By the time James Cole had torched his 5th location, they sent their own ghost to find him. His name was Diego Alvarez, a Colombian mercenary, ex-Caibil, trained in Guatemala and hardened in jungle warfare. Where James was precision, Diego was brutality. Torture expert, interrogation, counter-guerrilla. And he had orders. Find the American, cut him into pieces, bring his head to La Hermandad. James felt it before the first shot fired. He'd been sitting under a rusted water tower scanning a drop point near Saltillo when the birds went silent. No wind, no dust, no sound. He ducked just in time. A bullet cracked past his head and punched through the metal behind him. He rolled, scrambled behind a collapsed tank, and returned fire. But his shooter was already gone. Not a cartel runner, not a street-level goon. This was different. James felt it in his spine. A hunter. Just like him. He retreated into the Sierra Madre foothills, sticking to narrow trails and dry riverbeds. He moved at night, slept under brush during the day, checked for shadows behind every turn. He found dead cartel men along the road. 3 of them. Executed with clean headshots and no loot taken. James didn't kill them, but someone wanted him to know they could. A warning, he thought, or an invitation. Rivas called on the 3rd night. "You've got heat," he said. "Someone named Alvarez, Colombian. He's not cartel, he's freelance." "Why him?" Because they're scared now. You hurt them worse than anyone ever has. They don't want you dead. They want you erased. James stared across the canyon as the sun set behind jagged rocks. I'll save them the trouble. That night, he laid a trap. He wired a false trail, a series of blood smears, broken branches, and boot prints leading into a low ravine surrounded by limestone cliffs. Then he hid above, rifle ready, wind zeroed, breath steady. At 3:12 a.m., the shadow came. Light steps, silent movement, a blur in the dark. Alvarez. He didn't step into the trap. He circled it. James adjusted slightly, and that's when the shot came. Not from below, from behind. The rock exploded next to his head. He rolled, fired once, twice, missed. Alvarez dropped from the ridge, landing like a panther. Knife drawn, muzzle flash in the dark. James ducked. The blade sliced past his ribs. He slammed his shoulder into the man, sending them both to the dirt. A tangle of fists, elbows, blood, and breath. James felt the blade graze his forearm. He grabbed Alvarez's wrist, twisted until something snapped. Alvarez grunted, drove a knee into James's chest, and broke free. They circled in the dark, blood dripping from both. No words, just war. James charged first, faked high, went low. Alvarez blocked, kicked James back into the dirt. Then Alvarez pulled a flash grenade from his vest, pulled the pin. James looked away just in time. The white burst lit the ravine like sunrise. Alvarez moved in, but James had vanished into the smoke. One breath, two. Then the sound of gravel behind him. Alvarez spun, too late. James slammed the butt of his rifle into the back of the mercenary's head. Alvarez stumbled. James pressed the barrel to his skull. "I'm not Cartel," Alvarez said, panting. "I'm just hired." James hesitated, then fired. The echo rolled through the canyon like thunder. And then there was silence. James sat down, bleeding from 3 places, hands shaking, chest heaving. He didn't feel like a hero. He just felt tired. At sunrise, Rivas met him on the ridge. "You okay?" James nodded slowly. "That was their best shot," he said. "They sent a ghost to kill a ghost. And I'm the one still breathing." Later that day, a message spread across encrypted cartel channels. El Gringo Fantasma killed Diego Alvarez. He's not just a threat. He's a war. Anyone who crosses him dies. It started with a phone call. Rivas's voice, flat and cold. "They've reopened the ranch. Not Montalvo's. The other one, the real facility. It's active again." James Cole said nothing. "You know what that means, right?" Rivas continued. "They're moving product, and this time, it's not drugs." El Diablo's ranch was legend even in cartel circles, an off-the-books compound buried in the mountains west of Zacatecas, reachable only by foot, mule, or helicopter. It had been shut down years ago, after too many bodies surfaced nearby. Now it was active again, and filled with children. James didn't hesitate. He geared up the same night. 2 rifles suppressed sidearm, 3 grenades, 1 GPS beacon, a flash drive with all the intel Rivas had scraped together. He left Eli in safe hands. "I'll be back," James said. Eli didn't ask for a promise. He just nodded. Calderon joined him for the drop-off. They hiked 4 hours through dense brush, rocky switchbacks, and cacti so tall they looked like warped crucifixes under moonlight. From the high ridge, the ranch came into view, a square of light and movement in a bowl of darkness. Generator noise, dogs barking, trucks idling. 30 men, Calderon said, peering through the scope. "Maybe more." James adjusted the straps on his vest. "Then I won't need to aim far." They descended like shadows, weaving between old mining cuts and erosion trails until they reached the lower perimeter fence. Motion sensors, tripwires. James smiled. Sloppy work. He'd trained men to kill in 6 continents. This was amateur hour. He snipped a cable, rerouted a circuit, and slipped through with barely a breath disturbed. Calderon covered the south. James went straight up the gut. Inside, the place was more brutal than expected. Concrete floors soaked in runoff. Stalls turned into cages. Mattresses on dirt. Buckets instead of toilets. Children sat in corners, silent. Eyes wide, hollow. James moved room to room, clearing guards with single shots. One to the head, one to the throat. No alarms. He reached the central building, a long, low barn with steel doors. Inside, cages. 10 girls, 6 boys. 1 woman, bound and bruised. Eyes locked on his like she'd seen a ghost in reverse. "You're American?" she asked. "I'm what gets you out of here." He radioed Calderon. "Package confirmed. Multiple miners. Holding zone secure. Call Rivas. We need extraction within the hour." "Already done." As they prepped to move, James heard the whine of an engine. Not a car, but a helicopter. Then came the voice of Montalvo's brother, Esteban, a bigger man with less charm and no patience. He stood outside the barn with 8 armed men and a megaphone. "Give up, gringo. You can't take them. This is our land, our business." James opened the barn's front doors. He stepped into the night, rifle in hand, eyes glowing in the wash of floodlights. "This land doesn't belong to devils," he growled. Esteban hesitated. James raised the rifle. Then the shooting started. The firefight lit up the ranch like a war movie. James dropped 2 guards before they could reach cover. Calderon picked off 3 more from the east ridge. Children screamed, huddling behind overturned tables and crates. Esteban rushed the front, firing wildly, screaming in Spanish. James took a hit to the vest. Knocked him back, wind gone, but not broken. He returned fire. The bullet caught Esteban in the thigh. The man crumpled, screaming. James walked up to him as the final gunman fled into the hills. Esteban spat blood. "You think this ends here?" he hissed. James raised his weapon. "No," he said. "But you do." He pulled the trigger. By dawn, the ranch was nothing but smoke and shrapnel. The children were airlifted by authorities Rivas had coordinated. James and Calderon stood by the last burning wall, watching the rot finally collapse. "You just wiped out 3 cartel tiers," Calderon said. "They'll never recover from this." James looked out over the valley, silent. "Then we're done." They were halfway across the desert when the ambush came. James Cole drove an old pickup, windows down, heat like a furnace. Eli sat in the passenger seat, eyes locked on the horizon, still silent from everything they'd seen, everything his father had become. The truck hummed over loose gravel, headed north to the U.S. border, a route James had chosen carefully. Too carefully. That's why they were waiting. The first shot blew out the front tire. James spun the wheel, but the truck lurched off the road and skidded into a shallow ditch. Dust clouded the windshield. Before they could breathe, headlights flashed behind them. 3 SUVs' doors opened. 7 men in tactical black. Eli's breath caught. James reached under the seat, yanked out a pistol, and pushed the glove box open. Inside, a sawed-off shotgun, a flare gun, and 1 last grenade. "Stay down," he said. Then he opened the door and walked into the open. "James Cole," the leader said, stepping forward. His voice was smug, smooth. Or should I say, El Gringo Fantasma. James raised his pistol. "You here to collect a bounty?" Numbered just to erase a problem. Permanently. "Funny," James said. "I was about to do the same." They opened fire. James ducked behind the tailgate as bullets peppered the metal. Eli crouched in the footwell, covering his ears. The sound was deafening, hot and sharp. James returned fire. 2 clean shots. 2 men dropped. He counted 5 left. A bullet grazed his shoulder. Another clipped the rearview mirror. He moved like a machine, trained and tuned, firing, rolling, flanking, breathing. He'd done this in Kandahar, in Mogadishu, in jungles and deserts, but never with his son watching. One attacker flanked right. James hit him with a shotgun blast to the ribs. The man crumpled into the brush. Another charged straight in, machete drawn. James let him get close, then sidestepped and drove a knife into his gut. 3 down, 2 left. One fired from behind the truck. James was out of cover. He made a choice. He stood tall, took 2 steps forward, and got hit in the thigh. He fell, the world blurred, dust in his eyes, blood in his mouth. He heard Eli scream. Then Eli stood, not hiding, not running. He picked up his father's pistol, hands shaking, and fired, once, twice, missed, then hit. The last man dropped, groaning. Eli ran to his father. "Dad!" James coughed, pulled him close. "You did good," he rasped. Eli shook. "I didn't want to be like you. I didn't want to kill." James smiled, blood in his teeth. "Then you're already better than me." Rivas's truck appeared minutes later, roaring out of the dust like salvation. 2 agents jumped out, weapons raised, but found no resistance. Only bodies. A destroyed pickup, and a father clutching his son. They lifted James into the back seat. Eli sat beside him, hand in his. "You made it," Rivas said quietly. James looked at his son. "No," he whispered. "We did." The next morning they crossed the border. No papers, no press, no questions. Just 2 men walking into the rising sun, the past behind them. The morning sun cut across the fields like an old memory. Warm, still, golden. James Cole stood on the edge of his property in southern Texas, boots in the earth, hands tucked in worn pockets. The scar on his thigh still throbbed when it rained. His ribs cracked when he twisted. But he was alive, and so was his son. Behind him, Eli tossed a hay bale onto the trailer bed with more confidence than strength. It fell awkward, but didn't break. James didn't correct him. Some things a man needed to learn by doing. The weeks since their return had passed in quiet chapters. No police, no agents, no flags or medals. Rivas had kept his word. Burn the files, close the trail. In exchange, James had delivered something more valuable than any raid. A full ledger of cartel assets, safe houses, names, and trafficking routes. Taken from the corpse of Santiago and passed to the people who still fought quietly behind the scenes. One favor for another. Justice didn't always come with trials. Sometimes it came in trade. James limped back to the barn and dusted off the feed bucket. Chickens clucked near his feet. The smell of hay and rust mixed with sweat and memory. Eli followed. "You ever miss it?" he asked. James looked up. "The life," Eli clarified. "Before." James wiped his brow with his sleeve. "Sometimes, in the silence, I miss the clarity. And now?" James looked out toward the fields. Now was dirt, labor, creaking wood. Mornings that didn't require orders. Now was slower, but not lesser. "I don't miss the blood," he said. They rebuilt the broken fence together, replanted the row where the tractor burned out last fall. Eli started waking up early without being told. James noticed. They didn't talk much about Mexico, but every now and then, Eli would flinch at the sound of a car backfiring, or freeze when a helicopter passed overhead. James didn't push it. He knew what scars lived in silence. One afternoon, a black SUV parked at the end of their road, the kind that used to follow him during operations. James reached for the rifle by instinct, then stopped himself. The driver stepped out alone. It was Calderon. Hair shorter, smile thinner. He approached without speaking. James offered him a beer. They sat on the porch like it was any other Sunday. "I'm out," Calderon said eventually. "No more jobs, no more ghosts. Mexico's being handled." "By who?" Calderon shrugged. "People who believe in clean slates." James nodded. "You believe in those?" "Didn't." until a certain farmer killed half a cartel and walked away. They clinked bottles. That night, Eli asked him if they were ever going back. To Mexico, James said. Eli shook his head. To being like that. James didn't answer right away. Then he said, I only picked up a rifle because they took you. That's not who I am. It's who I had to be. Eli nodded slowly. I'm not scared of you anymore, he said. I used to be, after I saw what you did. James looked away, ashamed. But now I know, Eli continued. You didn't do it because you wanted to. You did it because no one else would. James swallowed hard. That night, he slept without waking from a single nightmare. Spring came, the fields bloomed, the sky softened, and James Cole, soldier, father, ghost, watched the sun rise over soil he'd bled for, worked with, and finally lived long enough to heal. No more war, no more ghosts, just dirt and peace. He didn't fight for medals, he didn't fight for headlines, he fought because that's what veterans do. They stand up when others can't. A farmer by peace, a warrior by duty. And when the dust settled, he went back to the land he bled for. Not to escape the war, but to remember why he survived it. If you respect our veterans and love stories of honor, grit, and justice, hit that like button and subscribe.